Speaking of great directors, you're about to watch the work of a great director. And I was really blessed to be in his very first feature. And that would be Fred Zinnemann. How many of you know that name? Do you know director's name?
Oh, yeah. This is a very sophisticated crowd, Marsha.
Well, way back, can I tell a story?
That's why you're here, man.
At MGM, as a contract player, my next assignment was something with the terrible title of Kid Glove Killer. And I was going to work with Van Heflin, whom I already knew and loved working with, and Lee Bowman, the same thing. But we learned that director was a new name to us, and we asked around about it. Nobody knew who that was. And then we learned that this was going to be his very first film. Well, that can be rather chancy. So we held on tight and were very watchful, and came the first day of shooting. And this slight, gentle man came over and introduced himself and said he was the director. And then he sat down and asked the assistant to bring everybody in the whole stage down close because he wanted to talk to them. So from the rafters up there in the far corners of the huge sound stage, everybody gathered together and clustered around him. And in a voice that was almost too soft to hear, we all had to strain to hear him, he said, "As many of you may know, this is my first feature film. I think I'm prepared. I've worked hard and long to get here. But I'm the novice at what I'm doing here, and you are all veterans at what you do. Now, if in the course of the film, something occurs to any of you, whatever your job, that might improve this film, maybe a different way of doing it or a new touch, whatever, I ask you, come to me, tell me your idea. And I promise to consider. I don't promise I'll adopt it, but I will certainly listen carefully. Now let's start making movies." Well, they were speechless. No director had ever treated them not only as equals, but as maybe teachers. And I think they would have killed for him. Working with Fred was pure joy. Oh, I must tell you that one time when he left his script, I glanced at it, and the margins, normally white on either side of the dialogue in the middle of the page, the margins were black with notes. He had really done his homework. And later I saw on other pages, they were all like that. Fred had prepared every nuance, every little touch that could occur to him. And as you see it, you'll notice that I am kept very busy doing legitimate business, but he kept things moving, kept me at work. There are all kinds of little touches that if you watch for them, you will see that Fred Zinnemann is showing early promise. We knew he was going to go on to do fine things, finer than Kid Glove Killer. But who knew that we were the first to be working with the man who would direct A Man for All Seasons, and Oklahoma, and the topper is High Noon. But there are dozens of films. Many of you remember The Search and Julia. These are singular, wonderfully made films. And what a joy it was for me to be there at the start of that great career. He was a lovely man, by the way.
Is it fair to say that if you had to pick a director, you'd have a coin and one side would say Fred Zinnemann and the other one would say Julie Dassin?
Absolutely. He's been listening to me in the past.
But
Those are my two great favorites.
you worked with Julie at MGM in one of his early films. Two of his
We
early
did two films together, both comedies, very different kinds of comedy. The Affairs of Martha, I was Martha, and a letter for Julie, for Evie, a letter for Evie, and I was Evie.
Yeah.
And I think those two films were such pure joy for me that I probably found the courage to take the plunge and do my very first play, professional play, anywhere, starring on Broadway. What a way to break into live acting on a stage when you're on Broadway, everybody's ultimate dream, and starred in it. But I think I found the courage to do that because the director was Jules Dassin.
What made Julie Dassin special to you, director to actor, or Julie to Marsha?
A bubbling, wonderful sense of nonsense. He was born to do comedy, and indeed later tragedy. He could do anything, Julie did. But there was such zest, such, well, that great word, improv. He improvised on his feet. He would get ideas, and it was just exciting to be with him. And we became lifelong friends. I gave his children a puppy for my dog, and it was a lifelong friendship. And I've just lost him in the last year or two. But wasn't I blessed to work with talents like that? Well, you're on your way to see Fred Zinnemann's first.
Yes, we are. You know what I just because we have the advantage of knowing you and having the pleasure of your company all the time. If there's anybody, like, if we can take like 3 or 4 questions from the audience, if there's anybody that would like to ask a question of Ms. Hunt. Yes, dear.
My very first time in Paris, 1950, Orson had been an old friend in Hollywood. In fact, it was at the birthday party he gave himself where I first met my husband, Robert Presnell Jr., a screenwriter, radio writer, television writer, playwright, novelist. Enough about him. There we were in Paris, and there was Orson appearing on stage with a brand new name called Eartha Kitt. Eartha was an intriguing name. And we went to see it, of course, because the way I met Robert at Orson's birthday party was that Robert was directing the Orson Welles radio show. Now, nobody directed Orson, but there had to be a titular director, and that was Robert at the time, before he turned full-time writer. We went to see this play in Paris and discovered Eartha Kitt. She was unlike the persona she developed here, and the very extreme singing style. She was sheer magic. And she was about to open in a nightclub that very night. I was terrified. We went backstage to see Orson, met Eartha, and she was a bundle of nerves about to open in her nightclub. And we said we'd go watch her in the cheering section. So she brought us back to her apartment, where she reviewed the number she was going to do with a wonderful, very handsome black folk singer named Josh White. And I think probably one reason I'm kept busy at this ripe age of mine is that I'm one of very few survivors now of that well-known golden age. And there aren't too many of us left who can recall being there and having worked with the legendary people and having known them. And so while I last and while a few of us do, we're kept busy recalling it for people who treasure. And I do believe it was the golden age. I think at the time I knew it was golden. What I didn't know was that its days were numbered. And they sure were. We're not going to again. I hope we make new ones, but not those.